Hi, everyone. It's Kristan Hawkins. Welcome to this new episode of the Explicitly Pro-Life podcast. We are in season 3, and we're talking about having difficult, hard conversations. Hopefully, every episode this season will be helpful for you as you go on into your pro-lifeness and have conversations with those around you and online. Today, I've asked Michele Hendrickson. Michele is the Eastern Regional Director of Students for Life of America. She's a mom. She has our district pastor's license from the Church of the Nazarene. She's been actually, Michele, you've been with Students for Life for how many years now?
It's great. There was some volunteer time, about 6 to 7.
Yeah, it's been a while, Michele. Yeah, Michelle's been on our team serving in different roles. But Michele started off at our team as a regional coordinator, going to campuses, starting groups, changing hearts and minds, which is great because Michele, before she came to Students for Life, had a career as a teacher. So you definitely, I think when you lecture, you always, there's Michelle's teacher. Michelle's a teacher. That's what she is. So I asked you to come on today, Michele, because I know a lot of times when we're having discussions at Students for Life and trying to have, what's going to be our next project and how do we speak into a current issue or trend that we're seeing, I always like to have people who I know don't agree with me on other aspects in the room because we know we could get stuck in our own little bubble. And so it's really good to have people who come from things, views and decisions from a different point of view. And for me, that's you on our team. You happen to be one of our resident challengers of Kristan's mentality sometime. And so it's very helpful for us when we're having discussions because I find that, if I bring up, oh, we should try this. And then you say, oh, well, maybe not so much, but then this is how to take
the wording, or there's maybe a tweak, and then we'll get all the people.
So today I wanted you to come on because I thought this episode we could talk about how to share the truth about abortion with those who don't share your political or your religious worldview, because I think it's so difficult sometimes to connect with somebody when there's vast differences. And I think it's hard that a lot of pro-lifers tend to be, Christian and politically conservative, but those who we're trying to reach on campuses a lot of times are not Christian, have never grown up in a Christian home, so that Christian worldview isn't there, or they might find themselves on the complete opposite spectrum when it comes to all things politics. So I wanted to ask you some hard questions today about how do we have these good discussions with people who disagree. But first, how did you get involved in the pro-life movement? I really want to know your kind of story of how you got involved with the pro-life movement and then eventually with Students for Life.
Yeah, sure. I love to tell that because I feel like my story is like a lot of students out there. The moment I had to research what abortion was, it broke my heart. So at 15 years old, I chose it for a speech topic, not really knowing what I was getting into. It's the days before Google. So I had to ask Jeeves what abortion was. If you remember that guy, you'd ask him a question, he'd help you with your homework. It was all laid out for you what abortion was. There were some traumatic photographs, that were shown on the internet that weren't filtered out. You just got it all. And my heart was absolutely broken over it. I feel like I nailed my speech that day, but I didn't know what to do with that. I chose that for an assignment, but Students for Life wasn't really prominent when I was in high school. There wasn't anywhere for me to plug in. So it was just kind of quietly pro-life and went to a very liberal arts school, quietly pro-life there as well, nowhere to plug in. And then it wasn't until my adult life, I'm already married. I had my first kiddo at the time, and somebody invited me to the Maryland March for Life, where guess who was tabling, but Students for Life and Rock for Life. And I just had this moment of, if I had known that the pro-life movement as a movement existed and that there were jobs and a place to be, maybe I would have done things differently. And the person at the table at the time, our very own Eric Whittington, hey, you're young yet? What do you mean? Start now. Life's not over. And long story short, I dove in and am here. So I think that's the fastest summary I've ever given.
Yeah, I think I mean, I think it seems like not a big story, because people always ask, like, well, what's your story in movement? I'm like, I don't know. I found out what abortion was, and I was like outraged and heartbroken and decided to do something about it.
Yep.
I didn't have a personal abortion decision in my life that or crisis that led me to that. But it's a story that is important because there's so many other people out there who have the same, I'm quietly pro-life. Like, what do I do?
Where do I put it? What do I do?
Yeah. What do I do with it? And I think a lot of times, leading into our discussion topic today, when you start, I find that, like, when you first find out the truth about abortion, you're a lot more, I think, willing to talk about it with your friends and family, and, in social media now, be open with it. But it's hard, if you're a new pro-lifer, sometimes to, I think, connect with those who disagree with you about abortion, because you see the injustice, the violence that's being done every day in abortion. And it's really hard for you to see, how can somebody else not see that? Like, it's a black or white issue. It's right or wrong. It's not gray, but yet half of America would say abortion is a gray issue.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I felt the same kind of wave of, how does everybody not see this? Right. Mm-hmm. And you almost you could allow yourself to get unapproachable with it. You're so upset. And it's a good outrage. We should be outraged against injustice, right? That should make us upset. But to really reel it in, and what's the use of that if you're not approachable, if you're not going to be winsome, if you're not going to change minds? And it takes a lot of character development and a lot of time to kind of wield and practice, which is a lot of what we do at Students for Life, to help our students with apologetics and how to have the hard conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you train Students for Life leaders on campuses to have the most effective dialogue and discussions when it comes to abortion? So maybe if it's a conservative student, so you're talking to a conservative student, someone's in the college Republicans, how do you have a conversation with them about how to reach out to those in their campus? And are there some, like, blanket warnings you give them at the beginning of, okay, try not to do or say these specific words, say these things instead?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of my first basic training, if you will, when somebody books us for apologetics, or I know in my time as an RC, when they would say, come on in and give apologetics, I think what they're looking for is, where's my list of arguments?
Yes.
Right? Like, are you going to come in and tell me what to say if they say this? And I'll, shut that down from the beginning. If you're looking for, if they say, you say, I'm not going to give that to you today, because conversations aren't meant to be like an algorithm like that. But I am going to give you dialogue principles. And the first thing I'm going to tell you to do is listen. Look at that person, pause, actually listen to understand, not just listen to be patient. Right. So that's always my first tip, is listen to what it is that person's actually saying, and then ask good questions. So you want to get to know more about their view. Where are those gaps maybe that's coming in? And then you want to find common ground and celebrate that, point it out, right? And you're not giving anything away when you do that, when you find moments in the conversation where you can agree. And then my last one would just be nice. Are you smiling? Are you somebody who you'd want to talk to? Right? If you're being off-putting or angry, or you're visibly upset, they're not going to want to talk to you. And we have to ask ourselves, what's the point of the conversation? If the point of the conversation is to truly show light on the atrocity of abortion, to convince more people, then shouldn't we want that conversation to be successful? Shouldn't we want to bring them into that conversation rather than push them away? So really, most of my apologetics training, that first one is all about dialogue principles and how to navigate a conversation. And then once we do all of that, we're diving into some more scientific or philosophical arguments.
Mm-hmm. So when you're talking with somebody who, I guess I have this debate every once in a while on campuses, when you're talking to someone who is an atheist, who does not share a Christian worldview, how do you have that conversation that life is valuable? Because we know as Christians, life is valuable because we're made in the likeness and image of our Creator. That gives all of us equal value because we're all made in His image. But you don't have that from a atheist or agnostic worldview. Do you find that that's difficult to talk about life having value when you're talking to a non-Christian on campus?
It can be depending on the person. And you have to keep in mind, one big tip I'll give to students is, we've studied this. We've prepared for whatever display we're out with today. I mean, we are like looking for these people to talk to. The person who's passing the display is like probably on their way to lunch. They did not plan to talk today. So the mood they're going to be in and the frame of mind and what kind of character, they are, that's going to really set a tone there. And if you get a very genuine person who's willing to have that dialogue with you and sit in uncomfortable places versus someone who's just going to say a lot of maybe things they don't mean. And as you're having that conversation, how much rapport can we build with them? How much of a relationship can we build in those couple minutes, really? You don't have long to build that sort of trust in a conversation. And can you hold them accountable for certain statements that they make? If they're going to make blatant statements about, no life is valuable and, these choices don't matter and really who's to say, right? I had somebody go on, who's to say whose life matters and we're all the same as that squirrel over there. But I had been able to talk to this person for almost an hour. I happened to have my daughter with me at the time. She was maybe just turning 1. So she, pretty much a baby. And I felt like the moment was right that I could hold him accountable to say, if I were to hurt her right now, would you stop me? Right? Would you stop? And like, be honest. If there was a real threat to this little girl's life, would you stop me? And I think because of the way the conversation went and the trust that we had created, he had this moment of, you're right, I would stop you. Why? What's there in all of us, that there's something there that just draws us to protect each other when we see an injustice. But, I was able to build something in that conversation that just isn't always present with a lot of people who we pass and, they might be saying a lot of statements that they don't mean. And we're not going to be able to have that change of heart moment in every conversation too. So I try to remind students of that. You're not going to have everyone say, aha, try to point that out to them. And that's okay because you've planted the seed and they're probably walking away realizing, I don't know if I actually agreed with the thing that I just admitted I was fine with. Maybe I would stop somebody from hurting a child, if I were to witness that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting is because you will hear people say, there is no, no one has value or we're all equally meaningless. But really they don't believe that. I've never met anyone who I believe actually believes what they're trying to say to sound philosophically consistent in the moment and in that argument. One of the books I read a few years ago was The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. Professor, he was in New York. I think he's in Virginia now, but he talks a lot about this divide in the way conservative versus progressives think, make decisions. He has this moral foundations theory, and it's interesting because you can go online, you can take this quiz, and they've done it worldwide, and they found that no matter where you live in the world, no matter what religious belief system you hold, it's pretty much all the same. That the religious, the conservatives will, weight these 5 moral foundations equally, where progressives tend to think about 2 and not really think about the other 3. And it's fascinating to see. Well, yeah, if you're making a decision in a certain moral foundation, if you're talking about this decision that you want someone to make, if you're not in the right foundation, they're not actually going to even care about what you're saying. Like telling a progressive, this is how it's always been done, or we should respect the authority on this, isn't going to really add up. That's not really when they're making a decision about an issue or forming, their belief system. It's weighted pretty low on the scale. So I guess when you're talking to more liberal leaning students on campus, maybe somebody who's in, I don't know, the President Bernie Sanders Club or whatever they have on campus right now for socialists, how do you make an argument with those people? Is it different than if you're making an argument, having an abortion discussion with a conservative?
I will say it's definitely harder, but that's where that first dialogue principle comes in. You have to do a lot of listening and asking really good questions. What is it? Where are the gaps, that they may have with defining who the preborn really is? Do we have any sort of science gaps there, biology gaps that we need to address? And then once you jump into philosophy land with them, I think that opens a huge picture, a huge window into their world. Or are they bouncing back to maybe circumstances? You find that a lot with more liberal thinkers, that it doesn't really matter who or what we're talking about. It matters the circumstance that the woman is in. And if we're doing a lot of really good listening and we find that common ground, aha, I care about the circumstance the woman is in also. And can we do better? Can we have nonviolent answers, nonviolent solutions for her? I get into this conversation all the time, and it usually ends with well, in a perfect world, right? Why not now? Why are we pouring time and energy and money into just accepting that the best we can do is sacrifice our children? And there's something about that is very emotive, I think, to the more progressive or liberal leaning side that really works. That language of can we find nonviolent solutions has really worked.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think what I've been asking students is there maybe a less extreme option than ending a life of another human being?
Can we do better?
Yeah, to escape this horrible circumstance, whatever picture they painted, is there maybe a less extreme solution than ending the life of another human being? Because what you're advocating for by advocating for legal abortion is an extreme thing, something that can't be taken away, that will end the life of another human being. Okay, so can you go through maybe one or two of your some conversations that you've had, dialogues that you've had on campuses that were your most illuminating for you as a pro-life advocate of, okay, I had this conversation and this is how it's going to change how I talk about this issue in the future, or I want to tweak this?
Sure, absolutely. I'll start with maybe my most, I think, just shocking moment for me, that I had always trained students to prepare for this moment, that I felt like I wasn't prepared for myself. And I just shifted how I spoke about the topic completely. And that's on the issue of conception from rape. We try to prepare our students for this, always assume that maybe they might even know somebody and, God forbid, have experienced that themselves, but you just are kind of in a flow of a conversation and you almost forget that in the back of your mind. And I was on a campus and I had somebody just be completely frank with me and explain that was her situation. And it would just, paused me, obviously. And then I completely shifted away from, is abortion right or wrong, into I am so sorry to hear, that happened to you, that you had that experience. That's awful. Are you in a place where you're safe and okay right now? The whole conversation just shifted. And then we didn't pick it back up again on whether or not abortion was right or wrong. And it's like I walked away wondering if that was okay, because I didn't keep going into the abortion right or wrong dialogue. But that in that moment, I needed to see her and what she was sharing. And it was okay that we stopped talking about whether or not abortion was right or wrong. And we just kind of sat in this moment, two complete strangers. And she's sharing something extremely deep and personable. And so that just forever humbles me and reminds me, who we're talking to. We have no idea what they've been through. So that just really sticks with me, I think. And so there's one. And then another one, really just somebody who did not agree with me on any level. There was no real getting to any agreement on biology or anything. I don't know how the conversation got there. I think we were both drinking coffee with almond milk, and we had commented on how it's just not the same as cream. And yeah, I gave up dairy this date. And we got on a little kind of conversation tangent. And really the only common ground we had was that we both thought almond milk sucked. And that was it. That was the whole thing we had. But at the end of maybe 20, 30 minutes, he stopped with you know what? This conversation didn't go as poorly as I thought it would. And you're really likable. Aha, maybe I'll stop and check out the pro-life group more often, or, I'll come to a meeting. And that to me was huge. And I think students should celebrate that. Not that we should be out to be likable, and that's our job either, but, are we approachable on this topic? And that person came back, that person went to those Students for Life meetings. And we've heard stories of that, okay, I disagree with you at first, but I'm going to go to the next meeting and the next meeting and the next meeting. And then that just continues to change their heart and mind over time. And I think that's a huge win.
Do you think that's the biggest challenge that we face when we're dealing and we're trying to convert people who are on the different side of the political spectrum or aren't religious, is this, they don't really like pro-lifers?
They won't come up to you. Yeah. They see that display. They're not going to bother with that unless they want to antagonize you. It's very difficult sometimes to, we appear neutral, and mostly with our tabling. We're not wearing pro-life shirts a lot of the times. When we table on campus, we dress neutrally for the most part, but still the display is what it is. It's pretty obvious what we're talking about. So we get right down to it, and there is still just that stigma. So half the battle is breaking that for people and breaking down walls and showing that we can talk civilly about this. And that's almost always the number one thing, that even if we don't change somebody's mind in the moment, right, in that moment, and you don't always get that perfect moment where you change their mind, they're at least leaving with I'm glad we could talk about this, in a very civil way. And then that's just such a huge win and creates just a more productive, I think, Students for Life group on a campus. And then you're going to have more likely people to come to your meetings.
Yeah, I think that's what's so interesting is when you look at the conversation, if you can't get people to actually listen to you or pay attention to anything you're saying, then how are you ever going to change their mind? I think the current trend within the kind of conservative political movement is, shout down your opponent, make them look like a complete idiot, and then and that's what goes viral online. Like those are the videos.
It's the most smart aleck way I can make my point, or how do I Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And I think our success with conversations like that, if somebody is so radically different than us politically, religiously, and they don't agree with us at all on the issue of abortion, I mean, the deck is stacked against us, right? So I think the success in a conversation with someone like that happens before the conversation even happens, and it's with us as pro-lifers. So maybe mostly speaking to the Christians out there, it starts with our hearts and our attitudes before we even meet those people and have those conversations. Are you going to love that person enough and extend grace to them even when they're not doing that to you? That happens on social media probably more than in person. In person, I think there is at least some decorum for how we're treating each other, but on social media, throw it out the window online, right? And I think I'm a bit of a magnet for people who disagree with me online, because I do have such diverse, political beliefs, but then I'm also a pastor and serve in the church. So I have a lot of Christian friends as well. And so it's like, I can't make either side happy with my views. So my very liberal friends, I'm going to agree with them on everything else. But as soon as I make that anti-abortion post, man, they're all over it. And then if I am maybe more graceful, I've got very conservative friends saying, why are you giving them, the benefit of the doubt? Or why can't you word it this way? Or be, more bold with it? Whatever their version of that is. So I always go into any conversation like that, you can treat me a certain way, but that does not mean I treat you back in that same way. I'm going to continue to give you grace, continue to be patient with you, because there's a world watching how pro-lifers handle those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's what's so interesting with a lot of these arguments with those who come from completely different worldviews. It's not really about the argument of abortion or the humanity of the child, or how abortion robs a mother of her most fundamental right to have a relationship with her child. It's really about how they view pro-lifers in general and the pro-life movement.
It's unfair. I feel frustrated by that. I should prove that I'm a good person before you listen to a logical argument. But there is a layer of that that's there, and it's not going to go away, right? So, and really with anything, when we're talking about something that we disagree with, when we're talking to someone who we disagree with, we should just always be very considerate, because why not? Why go on a tangent of what kind of attitude or our tone or how we approach it? Why go on an unnecessary tangent about that when really it just gets down to the content of what we're delivering?
What do you think are your tips? So you mentioned it. I mentioned at the beginning. You're, I would say, a political liberal. I don't know if that's how you call yourself. I don't know what you give yourself.
Left of the middle.
There you go, left in the middle. In my mind, you're liberal. So what do you think that the mostly conservative pro-life movement should do better, so we can have more productive conversations? Like, what are the things that you look at the pro-life movement and go, I really wish we would change that or be more inclusive with this language or stop saying that?
Believe the best. Believe the best about the other person who you're talking with. As frustrated as we are when people call us pro-birthers and they don't believe the best about us, we should believe the best about them. They're not pro-deathers. That's an odd thing to say. I don't think that that's a very winsome thing to say. I still see that on social media or, in conversations. Nobody's for the death of children, but I understand holding them. And again, it depends who you're talking to and it depends on the conversation, because I like to hold people's feet to the fire and explain pro-abortion, right? You're for abortion. I think it depends the scenario that you're in for that. But to really hear people when they're saying that they don't like abortion, and because that there's a win there with that, you can wrestle with that and help them live in that uncomfortable place. Why don't you like abortion? Rather than force it down their throat. You got to own it that you're for abortion, you're for death. Like, it'd be more effective then to shift and say, why aren't you for abortion? Why is that uncomfortable to you? Why? Explore that with me a little bit. What is it about abortion that makes you not champion it? And not in a sarcastic way, but in a way that's going to slowly kind of open their eyes. What makes you so uncomfortable with abortion that you don't celebrate it, or that you're unhappy when I say that you might be pro-abortion? Just to kind of honestly explore that with them.
Is there anything else that you think that the pro-life movement should reconsider? Or I like using the word pro-abortion. Right. They hate it. And they hate it because they have to acknowledge. I said, well, are you pro-legal abortion or are you anti-legal abortion? I am totally fine if you call me anti-abortion. Totally good. So if I'm anti-abortion, then what are you? And it's fascinating because they really don't have a good answer beyond, don't call me that. That's not what I am.
And so I want to explore that. Absolutely. Let's live in that uncomfortable place and let's ask good questions, right? In an attitude of, I really want to explore this with you. I want to understand your view. I think that's a really good phrase that we can get better about using. I want to understand your view, because I feel like we're totally missing each other here. And if there's something I'm not understanding, is there another way you could word it for me? Why wouldn't you consider yourself pro-abortion? And then you just, whatever their answer is to that, make sure we're asking more good questions, because I think the way that we go about that with believing the best, because I'm sure a lot of times what they're trying to say is, well, we're for women, and, it's going to be a very women focused message, and we can have, I think, a little bit more progressive dialogue when we get to that and have them open up. Why am I uncomfortable with abortion?
Other things you think the pro-life movement needs to reconsider or do better to reach out to more political progressives and non-Christians?
I think, honestly, this might not be what you're looking for, but I've seen some improvement. I honestly have. Really looking at our Students for Life groups across the country and the types of conversations that we are having. I think the one area that we've got to do better is just online, especially now that the world is moving a little bit more digitally and you're looking at that comment feed. And again, it's always allowing more grace to that person than they're going to give you, and that's okay. That you're not backing down on your argument at all. It's all about how we're treating each other. And I just, would say encouraging Students for Life groups to not back down, get out there, continue to have these conversations. Don't let anybody cancel you for being pro-life, right? That's a lot of what our students are going through right now. And just keep up the good work, because I see a lot of great things out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the pro-life movement 20 years ago versus the pro-life movement today, I think the messaging, the just the different outreach methods that we use have really changed. I think you see more diversity in the pro-life movement than we've really ever had, or maybe we had, but you weren't able to see the more diverse views. And so I think it's totally changed. Just even since we launched Students for Life in 2006, I can see a dramatic change in the almost 15 years of rhetoric and outreach methods. I think talking about violence, talking about human rights, what are some other like really good, I guess, phrases that buzzwords that you can use when you're having a conversation with somebody who know is probably a political liberal? What would really kind of strike them and make them maybe like, oh, take a second, take a beat?
Yeah. So I love to use, we can do better than violence, right? We can have nonviolent solutions. I love the phrase that abortion is archaic. We can progress beyond this, right? You know, we can do better than taking the lives of our children. I feel like I had another one that healthcare. We love to talk about healthcare in the liberal land and progressive land, right? And we want the very best healthcare. Well, let's talk about what happens in an abortion. That's not healthcare. That is bringing the death upon this young human being, and that is not providing healthcare to both patients in a pregnancy situation. That one's usually huge.
Well, that's a good one. Do you ever get into the ones about like science? Because I always see from liberals of like that somehow conservatives don't like respect science and believe science, and I'm like, but you don't believe in the biology of a human being. So don't lecture me about science until you get that. Does that ever come up in conversations about like what science says, or is it immediately just, oh, well, let's go over here to a circumstance and talk about that instead?
I will say it's mostly a ping-ponging conversation. Of as soon as I lose over here, I'm a ping-pong over there. We'll talk about circumstances. We'll talk about science. We'll talk about all the things. At some of our most liberal schools, I remember when I was a regional coordinator a few years back at Johns Hopkins University, for a moment, they banned the use of fetal models. Yep. So ban the use of fetal models. So let's think this logic out, that my Students for Life group could not table with fetal models. Does that mean I also cannot go into your library and get an embryology textbook and open it up, right, to certain pages about fetal development? And, you know, that was quickly overruled and they were called out for that. I think our student leader at the time went on Fox News and, it was exposed. Wow, pre-med school will not allow medical diagrams or, embryology, focused or visuals. I mean, that's huge. And that is the school where I had the most conversations that started with, well, no one knows when life begins. So I had to bring a textbook every time. Come on, everyone, gather around the table. Let's look at it together. What do we think here? And it wasn't in like a sarcastic way as much as my heart was there. And, you get them to read through it and kind of own it. But like I said, it ping-pongs quickly to something else.
Yeah.
It does every time.
Is there a way to stop the ping pong? Because normally it's not a human being, and then you prove it's a human being. And then, well, what about she's raped? And then you answer that, and then it's, you're right. It just goes back and forth. Is there any tips you have to try to get them to think in a linear, like, let's just start here?
Okay, depending on that rapport that you can build in a conversation, right? So imagining like we each have our conversation buckets and I've got to pour into their bucket, right? I'm full and ready to go, but they don't have any rapport with me. As soon as I'm able to build that and I feel like I'll succeed with this line, I'll say, can we pause for a moment? Because this is feeling a little disjointed and that we're going from point to point. Now, you said a lot of really great things that I would love to address if you'll just give me a moment. And I think some of us just don't have the confidence to go ahead and just let's call it out. Let's just say the awkward thing that's happening. And it's that you're talking over me a little bit, or we're changing topic or whatever that is, and say, I really want this to be a successful conversation because I want to understand your view, or this is really important. This affects all of us, whatever it is that we need to say there, but just to call it out.
That's smart. I almost feel like sometimes on campuses, I just want to have like a whiteboard and be like, let's just go in a linear fashion. Let's put all your things up here that you're going to ask me. And we're going to go and I'm going to go right here, 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 and draw the little map for them, the journey map of the discussion, because it's so, you're right. As soon as they start to feel like they're losing the argument on science, they'll move over to a circumstance. And
it really is. It doesn't feel fair, but it is the job of the pro-lifer in that conversation to help navigate it a little bit more and to have those sentences ready. Because like I said, we've trained for this. If you're listening at home, you listen to this podcast, you've read books probably. If you're a student of ours, you've had your regional coordinator in for apologetics training. So this is something you studied, you prepared for, and you showed up to that display so ready for a conversation. And that person is just trying to get throughout their day. They didn't prepare as much and they're trying their best. So why not lend them a hand? Why not, say where you're feeling disjointed or, really good question, or say, do you mean to say it like this? I don't want to get you wrong here. And just that helps the conversation go better for both people, because we know we have the truth, right? We know we're right. We know abortion's wrong, and we know all the ways to show that abortion's wrong. So whatever we can do to help the conversation go better, we should.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point of just not being afraid to slow down the conversation, clarify what they're saying. All right. So what do you think? I'm asking you all the hard questions I didn't prepare you for, but what do you think? I asked you about the pro-life movement. What do you think the pro-life movement should do better? What do you think that as a political progressive liberal, whatever you're calling yourself, what do you think that the political conservative movement should do better? That are pro-life. Don't talk to me about other policies, because I'll tell you wrong. No.
I know. Where do I start? What a giant question. Ban all the straws, Kristan.
But I love my plastic straws. But no, I'm interested from your point of view. What you think the political conservatives should do better to connect, because so many of them now are pro-life. We've pretty much, it used to be the Republicans weren't pro-life, and now they are, and they're fully pro-life. But is there a better way for them to talk about being pro-life, to connect? Because I feel like with conservatives in general, the struggle is we're not given the benefit of the doubt that we actually care about people, right? So the 60-some million people who vote for President Trump for president, we're all racist. That we all hate people and we all hate Black people. There's no way there's 60 million Americans who hate Black people or all racist. But that is the rap that the mainstream media gives political conservatives. And I think that sometimes conservatives don't do a very good job, in my view, of explaining, no, we have this position because we do care about people, and we feel that this policy is actually going to be more beneficial for families, and it's going to take people out of poverty and allow them to, take care of their family. So is there something from your view on the other spectrum looking in going, oh man, if they only would say it like this, they might connect more?
Yep. Do you see me? Do you see the problem? Do you see me as an individual? Do you even care? And the fact that you said it, I'm saying it, we all know it, right? That the conservative groups, somebody who's more leaning to the right, you're coming to the conversation with a deficit. You are already assumed the worst. The worst is already assumed of you. You cannot change that. You can't, if you think it's unjust, too bad. You're coming to the table with a deficit, and you have to first, but no matter how logical you think your policy is, explain that whatever you believe in or your policy or whatever that is, it is for the benefit of these people, because you see them, because you care, because you think it will help families or grow the economy or whatever that is. It almost feels like we completely blow past or leave certain tragedies or challenges or problems in communities completely unacknowledged, and we just get right down to business, or the conservatives just get right down to business. This is a logical policy, but we need to flip that. You absolutely need to address the concern, and more than you realize.
And you have to do it over and over again, because you are already starting at a deficit.
Yep.
And I think that's I think for us over and over again, I say this on the podcast, of our problem is it's not our facts. It's we know our stuff, but it's the perception of who we are. And that just stops people from joining our movement. And we need more political liberals and, non-religious Americans to join the pro-life movement, to continue to have a very diverse coalition of people. But to bring those people in, you've got to find a way to reach them. And that means you got to get them to question, maybe what they've previously thought pro-lifers are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we have to be approachable in order to do that. And as much as I even hate saying it, yes, you have to prove that you're likable and would you want to talk to you, right? Mm-hmm. That's part of it, whether we like it or not.
It's the John Maxwell adage of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? Yeah. Like that is, I think that's what's missing from conservative politics all the time. I think there's too many left brainers is the problem in conservative world where no one thinks right brain. I think that's very important that, yes, you have the facts and figures and the statistics and the science, but you also have to have the emotional connection because that's how so many people make decisions. Yep. So we have to appeal to that.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right. What are your, I guess, top 2 or 3 before we wrap it up, best tips? You won't give if they say you say statements. But what are some of the best arguments that we should lead with when we finally get them to stop, finally get them to engage in conversation? What are some of the best ways we can start off that conversation with them to get kind of the brain juices flowing on the issue?
Yeah, it's really just good questions that aren't asked in a sarcastic way, right? So asking how do you view the preborn? And I'll concede terms all the time. I'll have very often people won't use that word. I would use more of a timing phrasing, right? Preborn, before birth, like that just to me is a logical way to frame it. But, if you want to say, what is your view of humans at a fetus stage? Or somebody insisted offspring. Okay, fine. Let's really, where we agree, like making sure we establish where we agree. We're talking about a living human being. When do you believe life begins? Like asking all those questions, and usually people land somewhere, and they'll go with, okay, fine, we're talking about a living human being, but not a person enough yet. That outweighs, it's always this like pitting the child against the mom, right? It's always fetus versus woman. And I try to take that and show, well, that's not true equality then, is it? Because I don't want to be doing that. I think we have an equal view of both patients in this pregnancy situation, and how do we help them both get through this unscarred, unharmed, and non-violently? Are there better ways that we can do that? It usually leads down that road. Then it usually leads down circumstances or how is society. And again, I'll come back to, we seem to be pouring a lot of time and money and energy into making sure we can still at least kill our kids. And maybe I won't say kill our kids. Maybe I'll say abortion or taking the life of these young humans rather than finding a better solution. Would you agree there's better? And sometimes that might be where we land. And I love that. I celebrate if that's where we can land. If I don't completely flip somebody on the issue, if they walk away understanding that we can do better than abortion, they've just questioned, their view of abortion. They were somebody who earlier today, they didn't think twice about abortion. They thought, yeah, that's fine. Now all of a sudden, maybe we can do better. That to me is a huge shift for somebody's view. So that is usually where it lands.
That's great. I really liked how you talked about that of, can't we do better? Like, is there a nonviolent solution? Also,
the phrase to shift the middle, right? And especially if they're like, well, it's not good for me, or who am I to say? There's usually that of, well, it's none of my business. And if you really get them to settle into what abortion is and what it does and how it can hurt women, if you've got somebody able to have that honest conversation, again, they walked into that conversation fine with abortion, no qualms about it, probably would have posted a pro-choice meme or two. And now they're walking away questioning, is this really the best we've got? And that's great. Get them questioning, get that, what they thought was their foundation of being fine with abortion, start to erode away at that. And where that takes them. I wish I could follow some of these folks who I've bumped into, who've had these conversations. I just wonder. And I've had a few more of my personal life, like friends and family, come back, and over the years, their perspectives have changed on the issue. So that's been really great to see.
Why did they say their perspective changed on the issue?
Just a lot of not facing the facts, but I had already had that rapport with them and a lot of friends and family watched me go through, having my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just something that, frustrates me, that they could have so much investment into my children's lives when they weren't born yet. And we're celebrating, hey, it's going to be a girl, it's going to be a boy, or, you seem to see the humanity of my kids here. And I think being able to point that out to them. And so I've seen a huge shift with a lot of very radically pro-abortion friends, who would have been fine with abortion through all 9 months, again, not thinking about it, to, okay, I didn't realize late-term abortion's a thing, and wow, I'm uncomfortable with that, and getting them to just live in that uncomfortable place. Like, well, why? Because it takes a life,
That's interesting, because you keep saying live in the uncomfortable place, because people are avoiding that discussion because they don't want to live in that uncomfortable place. But our job really is to get them into that uncomfortable place, because we do believe that they're going to choose the right if the truth can be shown to them. And
it's not all perfect. It's not all quick. Now, I've had maybe a handful of discussions in my time on campus where somebody comes up completely for abortion, and by the end of that conversation, we are shaking hands and saying, "Wow, I completely get it now. Like, you're right. I didn't think about the preborn being alive from the beginning. I didn't realize that humanity. You're right. This is about equality." And I'm answering all their circumstance questions, and it was just a beautiful sort of moment, But that's few and far between out of probably thousands of conversations that I've had. So it's really an overtime thing, because this is something that most people have made up their minds about pretty early on in life, especially now in how society is. Their families already talked to them about it, their friends. By the time they get to college, their mind's a little bit made up on it. They might not know everything about it, but they're pretty sure where they stand on the issue. So it's hard to really shift somebody's, view on something that's sensitive and that important.
It's usually, I find it's a slower build, and you have to figure out where maybe in the process they are. Maybe they've already had discussion with somebody, or maybe, they have never had discussion with somebody about abortion. And so you got to figure out kind of where you are on that spectrum, because you're right. You got to get them, like, I always feel like the conversion is like a linear, it's like this line of here to here, and you got to just move them in baby steps to that point.
Every person comes to that initial conversation with us having a whole life before them. You don't know what's it, kind of what I was saying with that other conversation earlier. You don't know who in their life has had an abortion, or if they have had an abortion already. And that's huge. There are people missing siblings. There are people, having to, reconcile the fact that maybe their mom had an abortion and they're missing a sibling. So if they say abortion's wrong, then what did their mom do? I've had that moment happen a couple of times where I'm learning, oh, someone in your family had an abortion, or, oh, your own mom had an abortion and you're missing a sibling. And that was just a very difficult thing that someone's wrestling with. So you just never know what kind of experience they have coming to the table before that conversation as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your dialogue tips today. This is really helpful. I actually had a couple ideas while you were talking for Students for Life that I'll email you about later.
Yes.
But I think it's so important. And I think it's important as pro-lifers, whether you're leading a Students for Life group or a community right to life group, you want to make sure you're bringing in a diverse group of people from different backgrounds, and that you're creating conversations through events and outreaches that can reach everybody, and to be very approachable in your conversations, because that's really going to be the way you change hearts and minds. It's going to be person to person. We've seen it time and time again with Students for Life. Michele, where does someone go if they're like, oh my gosh, Michele has got these answers that I don't have? How can they start getting trained by you, by one of the team members that you've trained on our team? Because they don't want to come to me. I'm not the best mind changer. You are.
So you've got some great guests. But
I like how you nicely tried to like, oh, that is terrible.
Great. So there are so many great resources out there. But really, house them all on Students for Life HQ. So I would just encourage people, if you haven't yet, to make an account there, and you're going to find, effective education tracks that you can get resources for. And then obviously get connected with your regional coordinator, especially if you're a student or if you know a student, if you've got somebody in your family, oh, so-and-so's pro-life and goes to this school, but they really don't know how to talk about this. Let's get them in touch with their regional coordinator would be the best step.
So Students for Life HQ is Students for Life. It's SFLA. Is it?
So Students for Life HQ.com.
Yep. Okay. And that's a free account. And we have all of our trainings, videos, sample events, flyers, all there, sample graphics. And you can be of any age to join studentsforlifehq.com. And then also to email and find the regional coordinator, you just email your state name.
Yep.
At
Students for Life. In Maryland, so it's Maryland@studentsforlife.org.
And that will go immediately to the regional coordinator in your region if you want them to come and speak at maybe a parish or church youth group. Or
those are some of my favorite talks, talking to the youth group, because you'll find, youth ministers might not want to touch the subject. And so it's easier to bring in the guest speaker, the expert on that, and just help, break the ice on the abortion topic in church. It's great. So your regional coordinator can come out, talk to your church, talk to your youth group, adults, youth, whichever.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michele, for all you do, all you continue to serve our team at Students for Life and our mission. And I hope you guys got some good tips out of this conversation. I certainly did. I wrote some of them down. You might have seen my computer shaking as I was writing, trying to type gently as Michele was giving us some great wisdom. But make sure you share this episode with other pro-lifers who might be struggling and how to have good conversations. But we're going to be having lots more podcasts like this about how to have difficult conversations, different topics that we need to address in the pro-life movement. So make sure you subscribe. Thanks, guys.